Captain James Walker returned from deployment expecting hugs and home-cooked chaos, not an empty house, and a note from his wife saying she was gone, without the kids. Left to raise two young children alone, James leans on the one person who never left his side, Rachel Moore, a quiet family friend who's been holding things together in his absence. As he fights for custody and rebuilds his life, James discovers that real love doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's been there all along, waiting to be seen. Welcome to Story Time with Papa Al. Let's join James and hear his story.
The desert sun bled into the horizon as Captain James Walker crouched beside a military Humvee, cradling a satellite phone between his shoulder and ear. His voice softened the moment it connected. "Hey, babe, you and the kids doing okay?" Static buzzed for a second before Vanessa's voice cut through. "We're fine. Noah had a fever last night, but I gave him Tylenol." James smiled faintly. "You give him that dinosaur blanket he likes?" "He wanted you, actually." Her tone held a coolness that wasn't new but had grown noticeable over the past few months. "But yeah, he's fine now." James glanced at the picture he kept taped inside his locker, a selfie of Vanessa, Noah, and little Lila, smiling under the backyard sprinkler. "I miss you guys. Only a few more months, and I'll be home." "Yeah," she said unconvincingly. "We'll be here." The call ended sooner than usual. "No, I love you." Not even a sigh, just a flat click. James stared at the phone, a subtle ache twisting in his chest. He chalked it up to stress. Deployment always made things strange. Distance distorted things, like a radio signal in the wind. But something about the tone in her voice, the way she said, "We'll be here," he couldn't shake it. Not long after, he stopped getting videos of the kids. "Captain Walker?" Sergeant Dorian peeked around the corner of the tent, holding a clipboard. "Yeah? You got a Red Cross message. From command, it's legit. Something about a medical discharge option if you accept it. Injury or not, they're offering it early." James blinked. "What the hell for?" "I don't know the full deal. Heard command whispering. Might want to take it, though. Something's happening back home." James took the paperwork with a stiff jaw. He didn't ask for an early out, but something deep in his gut told him to sign it. James stood on his front porch, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, the house darker than it should have been. No toys scattered on the lawn, no tricycle tipped on its side, no welcome home banner, just silence. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house smelled like dust and untouched furniture. "Vanessa," he called, no answer. A flash of panic surged through him. He dropped his bag and checked every room. The kids' rooms were half empty. Noah's superhero bedsheets were missing. Lila's stuffed giraffe was gone. James stood in the hallway, heart pounding. His voice cracked. "Noah? Lila?" Nothing. He found a single note taped to the fridge. "James, I can't do this anymore. I've met someone. The kids were better off with you anyway." "Vanessa." His hands trembled as he pulled it down. Just like that, after everything. After 7 years and 2 kids and every promise they made when he first enlisted. Gone. 2 hours later, a neighbor knocked. Mrs. Delaney, the sweet older woman from across the street, brought over a lasagna and a knowing look. "She left 3 weeks ago," she said gently. "Took off with a guy who drives a Porsche. The kids were with a sitter for a while, but Rachel's been stepping in lately." James blinked. "Rachel?" "Rachel Moore. You remember. She was friends with Vanessa before you two got married. Always had a good head on her shoulders." James nodded slowly. "Yeah, I remember." He hadn't seen Rachel in over a year, not since Noah's 3rd birthday party. She'd always been helpful, friendly, grounded. Vanessa used to joke that Rachel was too nice for her own good. Apparently that kindness was saving his kids right now. The next morning, James knocked on Rachel's door. He expected hesitation, maybe even discomfort. Instead, she opened the door wide, wearing sweatpants, a messy bun, and a baby on her hip. "Lila." Noah ran from the couch the moment he saw James. "Daddy!" James dropped to his knees, arms wide. Noah crashed into him, hugging tight around his neck. James barely held it together. Rachel smiled, though her eyes were rimmed with exhaustion. "I figured you'd come back early," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "I didn't know where else to take them." "You did the right thing," he said hoarsely. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't." He looked around. Toys were neatly stacked, bottles and snack cups lined up. Rachel had made it feel like home, temporary but loving. Rachel shifted Lila to her other hip. "She didn't leave you a plan, James. Just vanished. I stayed for the kids." He met her eyes. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "You'd have figured it out," she said quietly. "But I didn't want you to have to." Later that day, James carried the kids into his house, one on each arm. The silence felt less lonely now. He placed them gently on the couch, turned to Rachel and said, "Will you stay for dinner?" She hesitated for only a second. "Of course." She didn't say it, but James could see it in her eyes. Relief, warmth, and something deeper that he couldn't quite name yet. Not yet. James wasn't used to this kind of battle. Combat, yes, routines, orders, sand and sweat and mission briefings. But this? Sippy cups, tantrums, diapers that could end nations? This was war in its purest form. At 3 a.m., he rocked a sobbing Lila in one arm while trying to Google toddler ear infection with the other. Noah had spilled apple juice on the couch 2 hours earlier and was now asleep in a blanket fort built from sofa cushions and half a curtain rod. James had showered. Probably. Yesterday? Maybe the day before. By sunrise, the house looked like it had hosted a toddler-led hurricane. A knock at the door jolted him out of a daze. He opened it to find Rachel standing there with 2 paper bags, one with groceries, the other with coffee. "I thought you might need reinforcements," she said. James nearly cried. "You're an angel." "I'm punctual. Angels get better sleep." They sat on the back patio while the kids napped, watching clouds drift across a spring sky. "Were you always this good with them?" James asked. Rachel shrugged. "My sister's got twins. I learned fast. And your kids? They're good kids. They just needed someone to show up." James exhaled through his nose. "I didn't see it coming. Vanessa always said she was tired. I thought it was the kids. Or maybe me. The deployments." Rachel looked at him carefully. "You didn't do this to her. She made her choices. You did your duty, over there and back here. You're doing it now." He didn't respond. Not right away. He looked out at the yard, where Noah's toy fire truck sat beside the doghouse no dog had ever used. "I've fought in combat zones, led missions, but I've never felt more unprepared than I do for this." Rachel smiled gently. "You're not supposed to have all the answers, James. You just need to keep showing up. That's more than most." Something about her voice calmed him, like warm tea or the smell of pine trees. He wondered briefly how he'd never seen it before, how someone so steady could be right there all along. The days passed in a blur of daycare pickups, spilled milk, and bedtime stories that lasted just long enough to knock all 3 of them out on the same couch. Rachel became a regular fixture, picking up groceries, giving parenting tips, even helping James navigate the confusing world of preschool registrations and pediatrician schedules. One afternoon, James caught her singing softly while folding Noah's tiny jeans. "You know," he said from the doorway, arms crossed, "you fold better than I ironed my dress blues." She snorted. "You ironed them?" "Wow, who knew?" "I used to be impressive," he said. "Now I celebrate when Lila doesn't throw her food on the floor." That's parenting. It's the most exhausting, chaotic, beautiful thing there is. He leaned against the wall and studied her for a moment. "Why are you really doing all this?" Rachel blinked. "Because I care. About them. About you." James frowned slightly, as if the last part caught him off guard. Rachel stood, gathering the laundry basket to avoid the weight of silence. "I know you've got a lot to deal with right now," she added gently. "You don't have to look at me any certain way. I'm not here expecting anything. I'm just here." He nodded slowly. "Thank you." She gave him a soft smile. "Anytime." A few nights later, he woke up from a nightmare. Dust, explosions, voices calling his name. He sat up, chest tight, trying to breathe. When he looked toward the hallway, Rachel was already there. She didn't say anything, just sat next to him on the edge of the couch. After a few minutes, he spoke. "I don't know how to let myself lean on people." Rachel answered without hesitation. "Then start with someone who doesn't mind carrying the weight for a while." They sat there in silence until sunrise, their shoulders barely touching. Not lovers, not even close to that. But something warm and undeniable had begun to grow. James was halfway through folding toddler laundry, a war in itself, when a knock came at the door. He wiped his hands on his shirt, opened it, and froze. On his porch stood Vanessa, hair perfectly styled, nails painted red, sunglasses pushed up on her head like a crown. She looked untouched by time, and she wasn't alone. A man stood behind her, thinner than James, tanned, wearing a leather jacket like a midlife crisis. James stepped outside and shut the door behind him. "Well," he said, "you're alive." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. You disappeared for 6 months, didn't answer a single call. You left our kids with a friend and vanished. That's not dramatic. That's abandonment." "I needed space," she snapped, folding her arms. "You don't get it. You weren't here. You were off playing soldier while I was suffocating." "I was getting shot at," James said, voice tightening. "And you were—" "What? Wine tasting?" The boyfriend, James still didn't know his name, nor did he care, tried to speak up. "Listen, man." James turned. "Don't. Not your fight." Vanessa sighed like she was bored. "Look, I'm here because I want to talk about the kids. I want to see them." "Now?" James stared at her. "After half a year of silence? Of Rachel raising them with me while you were posting cocktails and sunsets on Instagram?" Her jaw twitched. "I'm their mother, James. That still means something." "Not to them. Not anymore." He walked back inside and closed the door in her face. Inside, Rachel was sitting at the kitchen table with Lila in her lap and Noah drawing superheroes on construction paper. She looked up, immediately alert. "Was that her?" James nodded, tossing his keys on the counter. "She wants custody." Rachel blinked. "After 6 months? She says she wants to talk about the kids, which I'm sure means I want to seem like a good parent now that my boyfriend might be getting cold feet." Rachel's voice dropped. "You need a lawyer, a real one." "I know. Do you have someone in mind?" She hesitated, then said, "Yes. Laura Chen. We were in graduate school together. She's brutal. Family law with a backbone. Make the call." Laura's office smelled like leather and intimidation. She barely looked up from her laptop when they arrived. "You're the soldier," she said, "and you're the woman who basically raised his kids while Mom of the Year vanished into a rom-com?" Rachel nodded. "Pretty much." Laura turned to James. "Do you have documentation of her absence?" James exhaled. "I've got the last text she sent before she left." Then radio silence. "I sent emails, left voicemails, nothing." Rachel took over. Doctor's visits, daycare, everything. Rachel slid a folder across the desk. Inside were printouts of dated texts, phone call logs, pictures of her with the kids at school functions, even grocery receipts. Laura looked impressed. "This is gold, but we need more. Do you know if Vanessa has been working?" James pulled out a printed stack of Instagram screenshots. "I'm pretty sure this is all-inclusive fraud at its finest." One showed Vanessa on a beach in Cabo, another at a vineyard in Napa, a third at some guy's birthday party captioned, "Cheers to freedom." Laura grinned. "Oh, this is fun. We're going to make her look like the absentee reality star she is." The court date landed 2 weeks later. Vanessa entered the courtroom like she was walking a red carpet. Tight skirt, red lips, high heels too high for someone allegedly ready to parent toddlers again. She didn't even glance at Rachel. James wore his army blues. He sat tall, still, but his fingers lightly tapped his knee, an old nervous habit he couldn't shake. Rachel sat behind him, close enough to touch, but didn't. Not yet. Vanessa's lawyer, a slick guy with more gel than judgment, opened dramatically. "My client was left behind to handle the home and children alone. She suffered immense psychological strain, and while she admits to leaving temporarily, it was under the duress of a neglectful and emotionally unavailable husband." James barely turned his head. Is that right? Laura stood, calm as ice. Captain Walker was deployed for 10 months serving our country. He returned early due to injury, only to find his wife had not only abandoned the home, but also their 2 small children. For 6 months, she made zero contact. No calls, no letters, no support, nothing. She clicked a remote and projected Vanessa's vacation photos onto a monitor. Cabo, Napa, a resort in Lake Tahoe. Meanwhile, the children were left with a family friend, Ms. Rachel Moore, who not only stepped up as caregiver, but also funded groceries, school supplies, and basic needs without compensation. The judge raised an eyebrow. Ms. Walker, is this accurate? Vanessa shifted in her seat. I needed to get myself together. I knew the kids were safe. Laura pressed forward. So safe you didn't check on them even once in 6 months? I meant to. Things just got complicated. James leaned forward, finally speaking. They stopped asking where she was after week 4, he said, voice steady. By week 10, they started calling Rachel Mama Rach. And now? They don't mention Vanessa at all. The judge turned to Rachel. Ms. Moore, why did you stay? Rachel looked startled. Because they needed someone. Because James was juggling injury recovery and 2 scared, confused kids. I couldn't let them go through that alone. The judge softened slightly. Were you compensated in any way? Rachel shook her head. No, I wouldn't have accepted it if he tried. Outside the courtroom, as Vanessa climbed into her boyfriend's convertible, she shot one last look back at James. You'll regret this, she hissed. James stood tall. I already regret ever trusting you. The ruling came later that week. Full legal and physical custody awarded to Captain James Walker. Supervised visitation only, contingent upon proof of consistent employment. Sobriety screening and psychological evaluation. When James read the words, he didn't cheer, didn't exhale, just nodded. Rachel sat beside him on the living room couch. The kids were asleep. The house was finally quiet. She'll try again, he said softly. Probably, Rachel replied, but next time, she'll find a very different battlefield. James turned his head, looked at her. I owe you more than I know how to say. Rachel's lips lifted in a small smile. Then don't say it. Just keep being the man those kids already think you are. There was a long pause, a comfortable one, but charged with something deeper. James nodded slowly. You staying for dinner? Rachel looked at him, her eyes holding something that had been waiting a long time. Yeah, she said, I'm staying. 3 months passed. 3 months of morning cereal spills, preschool tantrums, and the quiet joy of bedtime stories. James had gotten good at the little things. Lila's favorite pajamas, Noah's ketchup obsession, exactly how many marshmallows went into their hot chocolate. The war zone was gone. In its place was something soft, stable, and so was Rachel. She'd never officially moved in, but her presence lingered like a signature scent. Her bag hung on the back of the door. Her coffee mug, rainbows and sunshine, claimed the top shelf. On Sundays, she brought blueberry muffins that she swore were store-bought but tasted like comfort. One evening, while folding laundry side by side, James glanced at her and said, You ever think this is just normal now? Rachel chuckled. You folding a sock inside out while your daughter sings Let It Go off-key in the bathtub? That's about as normal as it gets. I mean this, us, the house, the rhythm of it. Rachel paused mid-fold. I like it. Do you? I do. James looked down at a tiny Spider-Man t-shirt in his hands. It doesn't feel borrowed anymore. It feels like mine. Rachel didn't respond right away, but a slow smile crept across her lips. You earned it, James. One night, he found her asleep on the couch. Lila curled beside her, drooling slightly onto Rachel's hoodie. James stood in the doorway and just watched them for a moment. He'd spent the last year waiting for the betrayal to fade, for his kids to adjust, for the ache in his chest to stop throbbing every time someone asked where their mom was. But standing there now, all he could feel was peace. Not loud, not dazzling, just steady. He gently lifted Lila and carried her to bed. When he came back, Rachel was half awake. "I should have gotten up," she mumbled. "You're fine." She stretched and sat up, rubbing her eyes. "What time is it?" "Late. You can crash in the guest room." Rachel looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, James didn't look away. "I could stay," she said, "if you wanted." The air shifted, not uncomfortable, just charged. He sat beside her, shoulders brushing. "I do," he said. "I think I've wanted that for a while. I just didn't know it." Rachel's breath caught. "I didn't want to push. You've been through so much." James smiled gently. "I know, but I'm not surviving anymore, Rachel. I'm living." He reached for her hand, awkwardly at first, like a man unsure if he was allowed, but she took it without hesitation. The next morning, the world didn't spin differently. No fireworks, no dramatic musical cue, just coffee. James poured 2 mugs and handed one to her. Their hands lingered for a second longer than necessary. Noah stumbled into the kitchen wearing mismatched pajamas and announced, "I peed a little, but not like a lot." Rachel grinned. "Progress." James laughed and ruffled Noah's hair. "That's our boy." Rachel took a sip of coffee, her eyes meeting James's over the rim. They didn't need to define it. Not yet. Whatever this was, it had time. 6 months later, the house looked nothing like it did when James first came home. The furniture was still modest, the walls still decorated with crayon masterpieces, but everything pulsed with life now. Mornings filled with pancake batter chaos, and evenings full of pillow forts, bedtime songs, and the quiet warmth of together. James had built a new kind of home, not with concrete or command, but with patience, laughter, and a woman who somehow made everything lighter just by being in the room. Rachel officially moved in 2 months ago, not because they had a grand conversation about it, but because one night she stayed and never really left again. She and James didn't rush labels. They didn't need to. When Noah started introducing her as my bonus mom, no one corrected him. One warm Sunday afternoon, they went hiking as a family, just a short trail in a local park. Lila on James's shoulders, Noah skipping ahead, pretending to be a mountain explorer. Rachel carried the snacks and a camera she never used because she was too busy actually living the moments. When they reached the lookout point, the view was simple, just trees and rooftops, and the faint shimmer of the town lake. But to James, it felt like the top of the world. Rachel stood beside him, brushing hair from her face as the breeze rolled through. "You know," she said, "if someone had told me a year ago that I'd be here like this, you'd have laughed them out of the room?" James finished. Laughed, then cried, then maybe ordered takeout and watched Murder, She Wrote alone in my apartment. He smiled. "I didn't know I needed you until I had nothing left. You saw me broken and didn't flinch." Rachel looked up at him. "You were never broken, James. You were just bent and stubborn." James leaned down and kissed her forehead. Simple, soft. It wasn't the first kiss, but it was the one that meant we made it. The next morning, Vanessa showed up again. James opened the front door, blinking into the daylight. He was wearing Lila's rainbow headband because she'd insisted it made him magical. He didn't bother removing it. Vanessa stood on the porch in black yoga pants and big sunglasses. "I want to see them," she said. James didn't invite her in. "They're at preschool. I mean, really see them, not through a court order. Just, maybe we can work something out. Like before." James gave a quiet laugh. "Before you walked out? Or before you sent that first custody letter after 6 months in Cabo?" Vanessa's voice dropped. "You've always been good at guilt." "No guilt, just memory." Rachel stepped beside him in the doorway. She wasn't cold, but she wasn't gentle either. "You had your chance," she said plainly. "You made your choices." Vanessa's jaw clenched. "Are you even his type?" Rachel shrugged. "I must be. He's happy." Vanessa scoffed and stormed off without another word. James looked over at Rachel. "You didn't have to do that." "I know, but I wanted to." He reached for her hand. "Remind me to never get on your bad side." "Noted," she said, smirking. "But it takes a lot. You, fortunately, are charming and wear rainbow headbands well." That night, James tucked Noah and Lila into bed, both kids snuggled in the oversized blanket Rachel crocheted during their Netflix marathons. Noah yawned. Are we going hiking again tomorrow? Probably not tomorrow, James said, smoothing his son's hair. But soon. Lila reached up and grabbed his hand. You sleep here tonight? Always, he said. When he stepped out into the hallway, Rachel was already there with 2 mugs of tea. They didn't say anything for a while, just sat on the couch, legs touching, the hum of the baby monitor between them. I want to ask you something, James said, glancing over. Okay. Do you think we should make this official? Rachel raised an eyebrow. Which part? This. Us. Maybe something more permanent. A future? A family. She set down her mug and leaned into him. James, she said softly, we already are. At a small backyard barbecue, friends and family gathered. Rachel flipped burgers while James chased a giggling Lila with a squirt gun. Noah showed off his new soccer moves to the neighbor kids. The ring on Rachel's finger wasn't flashy, just simple, elegant, chosen with thought and without ceremony, because the moment didn't need fireworks. It needed truth. James glanced across the yard and caught Rachel's eye. She smiled at him the way she always did, like he was her favorite view, even when he was dripping wet from a water balloon sneak attack, and for the first time in a long, long time, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be, home.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Storytime with Papa Owl. If you enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe.